All right, welcome back to another edition of Coexist right here on IQ Podcast. I'm your host, Co Lewis, and I'm very excited because fresh from coming in rescuing an elephant in the bush, I've got our very special guest, Michael Keigwin of the Uganda Conservation Foundation as my guest, and I appreciate you making the time. I just want to let our listeners and our viewers know there's probably going to be some feedback and stuff because you're literally out in the bush right now. So Michael, thank you so much for making time. I know it's evening over there and you had a busy day. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I want to introduce you to our viewers and our listeners on IQ Podcast. You are a member of the British Empire, an MBE, got that in 2017, I believe. Congratulations on that. How thrilling is that for you?
It took me by surprise, but it was a great honor. And yeah, it was lovely to receive such an accolade.
Did you think, oh my gosh, somebody's playing a joke on me? Did I actually get this? Because it is, I have such great respect for England and the British Empire, the way they do things and the way they honor their people. I think it's well-deserved, and congratulations on that.
Well, that's very kind. I was very surprised, and then but a friend of mine actually was the one who called me from the British High Commission in Kampala, and to make matters even better, it was Prince William who gave it to me, who's such a strong supporter of everything to do with conservation and Africa. So it was really nice.
That's amazing, and condolences to the royal family. I'm sure you being a citizen and constituent of the country, I have, like I said, I have a deep love for England, and I feel the loss. It resonates in my life. I can only imagine how you guys are feeling right now. And, having Prince William, who, following, and as it's come out in time, after the loss of Prince Philip and the Duke of Edinburgh, how much this man was behind conservation way before anybody knew. I mean, he was way ahead of his time. And for you to receive this in the lineage of the family who believe in conservation, you getting that from Prince William is pretty amazing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so very much.
Sure. And then you are the founder and you're trustee of Uganda Conservation Foundation. And the reason why I had reached out to you was, you've achieved a lot of things. Your foundation, you've been working in Uganda since 97. You work your projects in the Queen Elizabeth, the Murchison Falls, Kibale Valley National Parks, Semliki Valley Wildlife Reserve, Ziwa Rhino Sanctuary, and you work at a national level. So tell us how you got to where you were. Yeah, I saw your story of your uncle influencing you early on. Walk us through who you are and how you got here, because I love this story. And let's talk about what your foundation is doing, what you're up against, and how we can possibly help you here on Coexist.
Well, there's absolutely nothing logical about my career path whatsoever.
Nice.
If my dear father, who was still alive, if he'd seen what I've been up to, he'd just be going, "What on earth are you doing?" But yes, my uncle was actually a chief warden of the park I'm helping here in the 1960s. But that really wasn't the reason why I came out here, and I'm still here. It was more to do with originally I was joining the military, and I was in the Royal Marines and enjoying it, but wanting to decide whether to join the family regiment, the Irish Guards, or carry on the Royal Marines. So I came out to Uganda to take a bit of time out and see, and fell in love with the country. And but quickly saw the lack of support that was reaching the front line of the parks that were once the most visited parks in Africa, and also had the most mega herbivore, the big animals per square kilometer. And I just couldn't believe that these organizations weren't helping on the ground. And the gorilla parks extremely well helped. But the savannah parks, we couldn't raise any money for. There wasn't anything happening on the ground. And brave rangers, the girls and the boys on the front line, were living in terrible accommodation. There weren't enough cars even working. It was a pretty dire situation. And the more I got involved, the more passionate I became, I suppose. Turned my back on a career in the military and got stuck into solving problems that anyone could solve if they just looked at them and got on with it. And that's what I did. It's not extraordinary. In 2006, I went back. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just saying it is extraordinary because a lot of people see issues, but they just say, "Oh gosh, that's really a shame," and then they move along with life. So right there, give yourself some credit that you saw some issues and said, "Wait a second, maybe I can do something." So continue, please.
Yeah, and so in 2006, I decided that I needed a break. It'd been pretty volatile in eastern Congo in the Virunga National Park, and I needed to take some time out. So I did an MBA in the UK, and then joined a strategy group in London with Deloitte. And in 2011, finished with them, having been part of the London Olympics organising committee. And the guys here, actually in Murchison Falls, two of my best friends, the chief warden and his immediate boss, called me whilst I was at my desk in Deloitte and said, "You're going to resign." I said, "Oh, really?" I'm not being shot at. I've got a salary. It's great. London's fun. And they said, "I'm sorry, but Murchison's in trouble and we're close pals. I'm going to play that card and you're going to come home. And we need to solve this." And I resigned the next morning and came back. And so since 2012, we've been tackling monumental problems, trying to get this park back up and running, and it is being a success. The Ugandan Wildlife Authority are doing a fabulous job. That's the government who's, the Ugandans on the front line. And our job as the Uganda Conservation Foundation is to help them do a better job. They're hugely capable and often just don't have the resources to take the steps that they need and can do. So the little things we help with, they flourish with. And that's why the park is recovering. So the Rothschild's giraffes have gone from 400 to 2,000.
Wow.
And we have over 75% of the Rothschild's giraffes of the world here. So terribly important to look after them. The lions are doing better. The Uganda cobs, which is an antelope, like your whitetails, they're up to about 150,000 from about 60 or 70,000. So everything's heading the right way. Tourism was breaking the records that we ever had in the park, but then COVID came. But now we're
blanket of the world.
Yeah, so I'm tragically, it's hit us hard in terms of all of the tourism's gone. 95% of the revenues reaching Ugandan Wildlife Authority to operate have disappeared.
That's a staggering 95%. Michael, when I was researching and learning more about your organization for this podcast and for this interview, we have a lot of parallels in our life, and I kind of feel like I have a friend already. I've never met you in person, but I can relate to you on so many levels. Your awareness, how it came about, you kind of took this circuitous route to get to where you are today, because I was the daughter of a safari operator in Ethiopia in the 60s and early 70s on the Awash Game Reserve. So I understand what I saw back then, the numbers of animals, of different species. The numbers were staggering. And, I moved stateside years later, and slowly I've been watching this nightmare unfold. And then, just God called me out to do something about it. I'm like, you know what? I've had a 35-year career in radio. I've got to use this platform for something bigger and more important in the world. And, kind of did what you did, saw a problem, said, I'm going to do something about it. And I relate to it because my co-founder and I have a foundation in Zambia, and we kind of do the same thing. We support the Zambian Wildlife Authority. They're now called National Parks and Wildlife Department. So we're filling in and plugging in the holes where they need help. But, they got their budget slashed from $2 million to $600,000, and then obviously nothing during COVID. So I fully understand what you guys are facing right now, because it's like your foundation is really the foundation getting things done. Thank God you're there, you know?
Yeah, and it is difficult because as much as we protected, I say we, the Uganda Wildlife Authority has protected the salaries of the rangers, the guys and girls on the front line, with all the budgets cut by 85%, they can't now feed them. They can't keep their vehicles moving. So how do we operate? How do we go and get vets to an animal that's caught up in a snare or injured by a bullet? Or how do we keep the anti-poaching going? It's really difficult, and COVID is not the only challenge we've had. We've gone from locusts to anthrax to the River Nile that comes through the Murchison Falls National Park, 120 kilometers of it, has flooded over record levels by 2 meters. Now, that's meant we can't cross the parks. We're now effectively managing 2 parks. So if there's a crisis in the north, we can't get there because the headquarters is in the south.
Yeah.
And it adds to our costs and problems, and to the local farmers who've, already in lockdowns, and what they grow is what they eat. And the crops are failing. The markets aren't open because they're not allowed to mix because of COVID. It's desperate times. So sadly, many of them are taking the wrong leap, but you can understand it. They're trying to find a plate of food for their kids, or trying to make a bit of money. And it's a very delicate balance that we need to keep the opportunity for our grandkids to see wildlife as such as we have. But at the same time, we've also got to make sure the local people are okay. And they used to get 20% of all the income coming from the park, but there's no income coming into the park. So all of the, tourism, the supply chains have gone, so we're not buying food from them, we're not employing from them. It's a lot of different things that are awkward at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got some fabulous people supporting us, and thank you all for inviting us. It's a real pleasure.
Of course, and that's why I had started this podcast, is because having started a foundation 6 years ago, it is so incredibly hard. If I had to read, I kind of feel like, did I make the right decision to start a foundation on the other side of the globe? Maybe not so much, but I'm in it, so I'm sticking with it. I'm going to be out there this summer. Yeah, I'm going to be out there this summer.
My wife questions me quite a lot, saying,
sure.
Are you ever going to earn any money?
Hey, again, I feel like I'm talking to myself. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking to myself. And interesting that you were talking about the issue with the locals, and having food to eat and all that stuff. We had decided that during COVID, no matter what it took, whatever it was going to take, we were going to keep our rangers full-time salary and working full-time, of course, safely. And we were going to keep, our sewing and our school and our beekeeping on half salary until things picked up, because we didn't want them to have to worry about where they were going to eat, and the drive to illegally hunt and stuff like that. We really worked hard to be doing it right. You know what I mean? Being good examples in the area of how to do things right, even if it was a huge struggle for us. We wanted to take care of the team because we believe in the team and we love the team and everybody involved. So we said, we're going to support you every possible way we can, and we're not letting anybody go, and we're not going to do that. And I'm really glad we took it. It was extremely hard, and it's still going to be extremely hard because, believe me, we haven't even, there's no bounce back yet. But it was a decision that we made that we're glad, and we're sticking by it. But a lot of organizations around us just bailed. They just their people, bye-bye. You know what I mean? Even though we know they had money, they just let them go. And I'm like, we can't do this. We have to lead by example. And it is difficult because you're right. People are barely subsisting as it is. They're on that fine line. And when a pandemic or, like you said, flooding comes in, it changes everything so dramatically and instantly. It's not like they have any money in the bank and can hang on for a while. There's none of that going on. So I understand. So how does it stand right at this exact moment with your rangers? Like, how many do you have, and what are they doing right now?
In Murchison Falls, where I am right now, there are just over 200 rangers covering 5,000 square kilometers. They're busy patrolling, making sure that anyone coming in here to kill elephants, or try to, is prevented from doing so. And if there are those who've laid snares in areas of which there are tons and tons of snares distributed around the park, we remove them as quickly as we can, so no animal gets into them, like the female elephant with her baby today.
Yeah. Like for our viewers and listeners who just might be tuning in, you had let me know before this interview. You said, I'm out on an emergency call for a snaring. I'm going to be coming back dirty and messy and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't care how you look. That's a great story, and I hope the elephant's okay. Is everybody okay? The elephant's okay?
Well, and the vets are still out there.
Okay.
So we managed to get them to the spot where they were. It's very difficult because the female and the other family members are around, so that can get very dangerous.
Yes.
So I don't know how they've done now, but they were certainly in and around the right family. I came back for this, so I hope they're fine.
I appreciate it, seriously. So, so the rangers, so the 200, does that include the Ugandan Wildlife Authority? Like
that is all Ugandan Wildlife Authority.
Everything.
So the Ugandan Wildlife Authority is the government that runs the park, and they employ all the rangers. Our job as the Uganda Conservation Foundation is to help them. So there are a variety of types of rangers out there. You've got the law enforcement guys and girls who are doing the anti-poaching. You've then got the community conservation guys and girls who are looking after the welfare of our greatest partners, the people who live in the parks and around the parks, the farmers, if you like. And they do have significant problems with, it might be elephants coming out of the park or returning into the park, but through their maze, and stopping their ability, their legal ability to feed their families. So it's our responsibility to help them. So we have rangers who are there to do that. And of course, if lions start to take an interest in cattle, we've got to try and push them back in. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes people will poison lions or try and kill them anyway. We also have intelligence rangers. We have tour guide rangers who are there to look after the tourism sector. There's lots of different types. Research and monitoring people who are your academia who are researching fun and funky things about all sorts of wildlife or ecological bits. So there's lots of types, but they're all, if need be, frontline rangers if there is an issue.
That's amazing. I didn't know if you were running your own ranger team alongside the Ugandan forces, or how you guys were structured. But it's, again, the need is so immense here. You know, people wonder why you people want to dedicate their lives to Africa and the wildlife there. It's because it is such a unique set of circumstances, and it's Africa is completely different from the rest of the planet. The wildlife is completely different. I feel like a very deep soul connection. Even if people in the U.S., when they talk about elephants, there's a softness. They connect with these animals. You know, they've been around for millions and millions of years, and you know, people wonder why you want to sit there and put all your resources in a country or an area far away. Well, there are a lot of reasons people do that, and you know, I wanted to understand the structure of how Uganda Conservation Foundation was working, like all encompassing. So let me ask you this: on your human-animal conflict issues, do you guys introduce things like the biofencing stuff? Have you guys gotten into that arena by chance?
Yeah, I mean, it's been done for a long time. I seem to remember it actually came from Zimbabwe originally. There was a gentleman called Loki Osborne, another from Guy Parker from memory. Yeah, we have in Ishasha in Queen Elizabeth National Park, which was the place where we had the tragedy of the 6 lions being poisoned a few weeks ago. I lived there for 10 years, and part of my work there was to help open up that whole region. And we had Africa's worst elephant crop raiding. It was just immense. And the elephants are moving in huge groups of 200 or more in each group. And they would enter the subsistence crops, very densely populated crops. And the devastation was easy to see. So the park and community had a horrible time. And yes, I spent 5 years. That's actually one of the things that kept me here, was to resolve that. There was a lot of rebel activity in Eastern Congo as well, and all sorts of other things. But we managed to put in a trench, which is 35 kilometers long, dug by hand, 2 meters deep, 2 meters wide, putting in fencing, and as you say, the type of olfactory elephants, I mean, obviously amazing sense of smell. We would have rags mixed in with sort of old engine oil, with chilies, with dung, and we put that on the fence posts. We put it all over the place, and it worked to a certain extent. It was a nice little tool to have, but it's by no means a way of stopping things. Mm-hmm. It just meant that the elephants, when they're not so keen on that smell, maybe it's too human or something, and off we go. And yes, we put beehives in, and to a limited extent, they also worked. But it was really the combination of everything, especially making the weekly effort of working with the communities and building that relationship. And it's the relationship between the park and the communities that is golden. It never is golden. It's always difficult. But you have to do your jolly best to look after them.
True. They're your biggest allies. If you go into an area, if you don't earn the respect and the trust of the locals, and they sign on to what you're trying to do and your vision to help, you will be swimming upstream all day long unless they are into it. You know what I mean? They just have to be a part of it and look at and kind of relook at their wildlife in a different way, not just beasts of burden and hunting, but looking at the value of the income that these animals can generate and how it can literally change their lives. And once their perception changes and they kind of see where what the big picture is, we haven't had any issues. People are like, oh, I get it now. I'm understanding it. As long as we can take care of the survival mode, if we can keep them surviving and they've got food on the table and they've got some clothes and they've got some education, then things are good. Then you have people who really want to be part of something big and they want to be part of success stories. So that's amazing. And early on, I was saying how excited I was to talk to you. Of course, again, Michael Keigwin is my special guest. He's a member of the British Empire, a high award, and very well deserved for his work and his dedication to Africa. He thinks he's crazy, but I think he's a hero. There, we'll just take that. But you had mentioned the lions, and that's what I had originally reached out to you about, because this story is unfolding. Not only are we dealing with poaching in Africa, we are dealing with highly funded, very well funded, highly equipped criminal syndicates that come in and they prey on poverty and they get people to do their dirty work, killing animals, smuggling animals. The illegal wildlife trade is out of control. It's the third biggest illegal operation in the world. And one of the things that we've been dealing with is like Chinese medicine and body parts of certain animals, and the list goes on. And tiger bones have been like the number one thing to mix in a million things. It cures cancer, it cures the world, it cures everything, allegedly. And because there's so few tigers left now due to the illegal trade, now they are turning to lions. And we have about 20,000 lions left in all of Africa from the last census count that I heard. So tell us what's going on with the lions in your area. What are you seeing? And what happened in that particular incident where all those beautiful lions were killed?
In a nutshell, lions need space like every animal. And the space is being taken up by people. And what's left is the national parks and very limited areas. And within those areas, we haven't over the years necessarily had the support that we have needed to make sure those areas are safe. So unfortunately, as you know, we've had in Uganda 40, 50 years of turmoil, and then suddenly 20-ish years of relative peace, and now solid peace. And in the expectation from lots of people is that the parks got away with it, but they didn't. You know, in 50, 60 years, our elephant numbers went down from 16,000 to a couple of hundred in Murchison Falls, but we're now coming back up to 3,000. The point I'm making is that the tourism areas are small, very small, maybe 5% of the park. And that's what people think is the whole park. But actually, if you haven't had investment into the park for 50, 60 years since it was first created, maybe 70, 80 years ago, then you've probably actually got 90% of the park that doesn't have what it needs to be able to be secure and safe for the prey species, for the lions themselves. Only now are we putting in the basics, the foundations of park management across the whole park. So for decades, we've basically been looking after these tiny areas of parks, not the whole parks. And in Uganda, we're different. We don't have much space left outside of the parks at all. Places like Kenya, Tanzania, and other places have lots of space. We don't. It's very fertile soil, so the agriculture has taken it. What we've got left is all we've got left. And quite significantly, if the lion numbers are, well, lions don't recover quickly after poaching for a start. It takes time, and of course, a female lion, if you take one of a female lions out of a small pride, it takes even longer to recover, and they may even be displaced by another pride and others killed. So that causes its own problem. But you have to have security around a park, and we haven't for a long time. And unfortunately, with lawlessness comes in people who break the law, such as cattle keepers who illegally bring their cows into parks. Now, for them, lions are not welcome. They would rather be able to say, I've got 300 cows and I'm quite happy grazing them here for free. No one's arrested me yet or challenged me yet, but those lions, let's just get rid of them, poison them. And that's what has been going on over many, many decades. The incident that happened down in Queen Elizabeth National Park is not terribly uncommon in terms of what goes on in Africa. On this particular occasion, it had two drivers. The first one was illegal wildlife trade, as you quite rightly said, but with a difference. It wasn't the kingpins, so to speak, we believe, that were actually asking for the parts. It was the local poachers who were prospecting, if you like, to kill animals and then try and find a market for them. So it's the opposite way around. The other thing is that Queen Elizabeth National Park, it's a very, very difficult park to manage. If you tried to design a park to be impossible, you've got that one. It's a nightmare. And I've lived there and I know it extremely well and I love it. But my God, is it a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And on this particular occasion, the Uganda Wildlife Authority have been really sorting themselves out and improving their management in Queen Elizabeth National Park. And the patrols have got better. And the infrastructure, where we're putting the ranger posts in the right places, has made a big impact. And there was also, the second driver is basically the poachers trying to hit back. Now, we don't know if that was a big enough driver to really go for it, but it was mentioned. And we think they were very unlucky because they did it a couple of years ago. Uganda Wildlife Authority wasn't actually as strong as it was in leadership terms in that park. But the head of law enforcement down there, for instance, was Africa Ranger of the Year, given the award, ironically, by Prince William again. With Trustee. And you know, these are brilliant individuals, not just as people, but as leaders. And there's no way they were going to possibly allow someone to come into the park and kill lions. And yes, the professionalism of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, I was on the telephone to the executive director, a lovely man called Sam Wanda, immediately putting in the wheels of action, and what we need to do is to get the intelligence unit here and another partner doing this, and everyone rallied behind and helped. And very positive, and they caught them. Not only 4 of them, but they caught other groups that are associated to them who weren't involved in that particular one. So the chain has been found, and the operation was fabulous. Hard work, my goodness. And yes, it's terrible that we lost 6 lions. And especially in Queen Elizabeth, where we are desperate for help. And we just got nothing coming in. We had an NGO asking us to go for a workshop the other day for 2 days of meetings. everyone just said, "Are you kidding? We're too busy."
Yeah. Trying to keep things going here. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, I totally understand. And again, I want to impart to our viewers and our listeners that you have people who have come to Africa to help on their own accord. And we're dealing with economies that are barely surviving. They survive on tourism. So you can imagine what 2020 and 2021 has done to their livelihoods, I mean, it's just the trickle down of damage and wreckage from a pandemic like this is we won't even see the total destruction for a few years yet. We won't be able to assess everything right now. But you have people like Michael who saw an issue, saw a problem, and wanted to do something about it. And the crazy thing is, the second you solve one issue, you kind of open up that curtain and you're like, oh boy, there's a million other issues right behind it. Like, where do I start? I mean, it's never ending. But an organization like Uganda Conservation Foundation is an organization that, when you put $1 in, it's having an impact. It's going into very important, well thought out programs. It's going in the right place at the right time. And that's what you want, is a lean, mean foundation that's on the ground, that identifies issues, does something about it, and does it in a way where everybody is part of the solution, not just people coming in saying, hey, you're doing it wrong. I know I don't live in this country, or I'm not a Ugandan or a Zambian. Do it this way. That's not the way you're going to have long-term success. You have to be part of the team, and everybody has to be part of the solution. So that's amazing that you guys went into that park and you're like, not on our turf. You're not killing lions on our turf, COVID or no COVID. We're after you. I love that.
And I sit back and watch friends of mine who are all the rangers and wardens, and just see how brilliant they are, and it's that unlocking the potential that they have.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege to work here. It really is, and with these guys and girls. I can't really sort of put it in any other way.
I love it. Where is your home base? I know you are out in the bush right now. Like, where do you live? Are you full-time in Uganda? Are you part of the time in London? Or like, what is the rock star life of Michael Keigwin?
Rock star life. Basically, I live in Kampala, which is the capital. That's where my wife is. I'm married to Uganda. Mm-hmm. And our lovely 3-year-old daughter's down there.
Wonderful.
So I can't keep away from her being wrapped around, her little finger so easily.
Yeah.
So I tend to spend 2 weeks in Murchison Falls National Park, go home for 4 or 5 days, and then I go to Queen Elizabeth National Park. And I'm always sort of preparing for the next one and sorting the problems out on the ground when I'm here, helping where I can. And so that's how it works. So I just rotate, basically.
So where does the main funding for Uganda Conservation Foundation come from? Is it from individuals? Is it grants? Is it trusts? I always ask because, I told Vic, my partner, I said, I didn't realize I needed a physics degree to write a grant for the U.S. government. I mean, I just don't have the patience to do it. I tried it and I thought, I am just going to go off a bridge with this thing. It is really hard to get funding.
Well, I'll agree with you. I can tell you now, I do not deal with large NGOs and I do not deal with large governments. They can take their high administrative costs and do it themselves. Yeah. We deal with people who want to get, as you quite rightly said, if you donate $1, I will show you the tangible thing that $1 has done. And I have little time for the big guys. Very little.
God. Thank God.
Yeah.
And that's a real shame. That's a real shame because there is so much money out there and there are so many worthy organizations. And I've had the pleasure of talking to many of them on Coexist. And I'm thinking if these people ever got, say, $200,000, they would have their country completely dialed in, like, because they're so good with $1. Imagine if you ever gave them something to really work with.
There's a lot of truth in it. I mean, my honest experience, having been a strategy consultant as well, is that the smaller the organization, the better. That individual or person has passion about something and wants to do something around that. And they will make every cent, I was about to say penny being British, make it really worthwhile. But you asked who our grants are through and our money comes from. We've had some incredible loyalty this is our 20th year now, although we were teeny weeny for 10 years, and we still are tiny. We raise about $700,000 a year.
That's huge.
And we deliver about 650,000 going directly to field projects. So it's a huge effort going that way. And all of the team is Ugandan. It's not a big team either, other than myself, obviously. I stick out like a sore thumb there as a Britishman. But yeah, there are organizations that I can't thank enough, and I don't have enough awards to give to them. I have no awards. I don't know how to say thank you to them.
Yeah.
People like Trust, who are both in the UK and in America. The International Elephant Foundation, run by a superstar lady called Debbie Olson down in Texas. And they look after us every year and do their very best. And that's the International Elephant Foundation. We have others such as the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. David Shepherd, the famous artist, especially with wildlife. And they have, again, for 20 years. I mean, those three really are the guys who created or forced me to create Uganda Conservation Foundation, saying, Mike, we trust you, we'll give you money. But what happens if you get run over by a bus? What happens then? And they made me create this organization, really. And they were dead right, and as they always are. And they are mentoring me as who I am today, to keep doing and encouraging me all the time. And there are many others. Bush Gardens have been wonderful over the years. They've been really supportive. Who else? Global Conservation is up in California.
Global Conservation Force?
Global Conservation, they're up in California.
Oh, okay.
That's a lovely guy called Jeff Morgan, who's just been, Mike, how can I help you? I need to help you more. I
asked you because
it's a huge partnership of really like-minded people who are so loyal, and they're friends forever. It's amazing.
It's amazing. I had asked you if it was Global Conservation Force because one of my friends and another hero down here, a guy named Mike Veal, he works around the world with training rangers. He helps raise funds to get them equipment like camera traps and all that stuff. So I was just curious if it happened. I hope you guys cross paths one day, because he's an amazing man. And I love
the more of these small organizations that work together, the better.
Yeah.
They really need to help each other.
Interesting you say that, because I'm not sure if you're aware of it or heard of it yet. It's still kind of new, but it might be something that you've been thinking about. I know I've been thinking about it a long time, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, we got approached. We had an inquiry from a group called Zambezia Conservation Alliance, and it turns out it's this family. They've been entrenched in Zimbabwe for decades. And so they were seeing all these organizations like your organization, my organization, everybody working independently. And they're like, why is everybody not working together, sharing information, intel, your victories, your failures, so we all can learn quicker and more efficiently? And it was funny because I've been thinking about this for years, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, they came. And so they work in the area of Zambezia, where any countries and areas that are around that area, so they can impart and connect people with other people like-minded. So you're not doubling up or just wasting resources. Is there anything in your area like that? Or is this going to be your next project? Now I've talked about it.
We're doing our best, and we're an umbrella organization anyway, trying to make sure that not every organization needs to have an office and cars. That we've got a pool of everything. We try and make sure there's a fabulous lion expert down in Queen Elizabeth working in a tiny area, albeit, but he doesn't get much support. So we fixed his car, and we're helping him, and we write proposals to include him, and yes, we do that. It's much more important people work together. But unfortunately, then, the conservation world is probably the best example of it not happening.
Yes,
And
I agree.
coming from the outside of it, I don't accept that at all. I don't like it. But it is born of an academia world where everyone is jealous of each other and they don't share data and they don't want to, they're very guarded about everything. Whereas I'm very much opposite of that, and I'd rather see everyone successful.
I knew you were my best friend. What you just said right there, I knew I connected with you before you even got on this interview. And what you just said to me is more proof that we are related somehow, because this is exactly what I've been talking about for years. I will run into other organizations and I'd be like, hey, we'll give you our data, use whatever you want, whatever we can help with. And they look at me very suspiciously and they're like, oh, we very protective of our data and all that stuff. I'm like, wait a second, aren't we all on the same side trying to help the wildlife? What am I missing there? And one of our
to make matters worse, you have a chief warden who is sitting there trying to desperately sort out problem A, B, C, D, and E. And these researchers or whoever they are, who are claiming they're solving the world's problems, aren't helping the chief warden at all.
Yeah.
Publishing a paper hasn't ever helped the chief warden.
Yeah.
She needs something done. It's a very different world. It's a sort of, it's not one I'm terribly comfortable with.
It's very clicky. Yeah, and one of our advisors, Dr. Tom Snitch, who I hold in the highest regard, very early on when I approached him about helping us. And
I know Todd.
You know Tom? Okay.
I know Todd. Yeah.
Tom
Snitch.
Snitch.
He came to Murchison here, in fact.
Oh, he's the best. Oh, he's the best. He warned me. He said, you know what? It's a very clicky world, Co. So just get ready. Don't take it personally. Just keep your eye on the ball. And I have. He was the one who warned me, like, how clicky it was. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for that. I'm just, we have a job to do, and let's just keep our eye on the ball and just keep going, because I don't have time for that drama. Literally, I got animals to save. No time for that. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who's been facing that issue. And I'm glad you feel the same way about it. You have no time for it. You got to move on and get stuff done. Too much to do. And that's why when I was talking to the Zambezia Conservation Alliance, they were hearing the same thing. And I kind of liked the way they were thinking. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get along just fine. You know what I mean? Because you are on the same page and you're not crazy wanting to keep your own data and not share anything. So I was just curious if there was anything like that in your area. So let me ask you, in your work, you're working in these different parks, and you've been there for years. How is it overall? How do you see conservation working overall? Are people becoming more aware in the area? Is it still very much an early stage of recovery? What are you sensing from locals and from people looking into Uganda? Because you're right, because even when I lived in Africa, Uganda was always in turmoil. Nobody wanted to try anything because you never knew what was going to happen in there. And things have changed dramatically. Where do you see, is conservation finally getting a real foothold there? And what is your thought?
I think the simple fact is that we are protecting the estate that is, or what is essentially the protected areas, the government land for national parks. There's not a lot of other stuff, but there are efforts being made to head in that direction. Those protected areas are very definitely improving, very definitely. And the quality of safaris that people are coming out to see are rocketing back to where they were in the 1960s,
nice.
Where you would just see thousands and thousands of animals and sit and have a glass of whiskey or a champagne with your loved one or whoever, and you just go, this is the most dramatic landscape I've ever seen. It's just, I don't have any words, which I'm sure the wife would be quite happy about, but I do see dramatic improvements, and those improvements are born from improvement of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority. I think I could say 20 plus years ago, it wasn't a happy institution. It had a lot of problems and wasn't achieving much. Today, you look at the quality of the boys and girls going through the system, and they're so capable. And there is a future there, very definitely. And anyone who turns around and says, oh, Africa's a lost cause, hasn't got a clue.
No, they don't.
There is such a generation of capable people here, with PhDs if they need PhDs, but also greater plumbing or electrics or whatever they're doing. They're good at it. And so mature in management and whatever. It's a delight to see. So on that level, if the quality of the people can continue to sustain that, if they can continue to sustain that quality, I think there's a future. But also within the parks, we're putting in the foundations, as I mentioned a lot earlier, to make sure they can manage it for the long term. The ranger posts are built properly, in the right places, people are respected, the mentoring gives people sort of the fabric of a good human being, the human rights is there when it comes down to arresting people and prosecuting professionally. Everything is being done at a much higher level than it's ever been done before. So yeah, I think there's a good future. And I think Uganda, GDP of tourism was 8%, and it was rapidly going up, more so actually than any other country in the world. And there's a very good document showing that, done by Oxford Economics. I think it's the Trade and Travel Council or something. But it was an incredible statistic that we were number one of economic impact from the tourism sector.
And that's
amazing.
Coming from, again, living in Africa early in the 60s, in the 60s and the early 70s, and always hearing about Uganda, and then growing up, there was a lot of turmoil. So to hear that this is stabilizing, that the quality of people pouring into the field, they're top-notch people who care and who do want to protect their country and the wildlife. This is all extremely encouraging to hear, and I'm really, really happy to see it. And I'm sorry, you won't give yourself any credit, but I'm going to give you credit. You're a big part of it because you're kind of like that support person behind that. If there are any issues, you're like, hey, I've got your back. We'll figure out a way to make it right or fix it or get you a vehicle or whatever. That's a huge part of the equation. So I know you would never pat yourself on the back, but I'm going to, because I see it and I understand it. I understand when you're there in a support role, those support roles are really important in what you do. And let me ask, go ahead.
Well, I was about to just say that there's a senior ranger here who last Christmas was meant to have leave, and he asked the chief warden if he could take his leave but stay in the park with the elephants to make sure they're safe. Now, this is the same guy who, when we found a dead buffalo on a snare, was in tears. And he's been in this park. He's probably one of the most productive, successful rangers we've ever had. And he took it so personally. And went into the communities with the community conservation rangers, talked to them and said, why can't you see the employment coming in here? It wasn't going in there aggressively.
Yeah.
And recently he had back surgery, like many of us old and aged men, you sort of end up with dicky backs, especially if you've been driving a Land Rover. I shouldn't say that. But anyway, he had back surgery. 3 months later, he's insisting he's on patrol again. And he's saying, but boss, can I just have a couple of painkillers? I'm bored. I need to go.
I gotta go in and take animals. Come on. You see, I love this. This gives me hope. So anybody who just thinks Africa's a lost cause, I'm sorry. You hear stories like this and you cannot believe the impact what one person can have in a whole area. It's amazing. And it's like fertile soil. When we lived in Ethiopia, I remember people who would visit us at my dad's camp when we bring vegetables in from the vegetable garden, they were enormous. And it's because you had all this fertile soil and nobody bothered to do anything with it. So you just had to pop a seed in and you got a watermelon like this big. I mean, people are like, oh my God, that's what Africa is. Fertile ground. People want to succeed. They want to do well. They want their continent and their country to be in a better place. So let me ask you this. So we've talked about the enforcement side. How is the judicial side? Let's say you arrest somebody, you've caught them with ivory or the lion poisoning. What are the ramifications if you are caught? And is it strong enough? Does it need to be stronger? Like, where does Uganda sit with that?
Well, in 2019, they reviewed the Wildlife Act and improved it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really go far enough, but it was a dramatic improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Probably it could have been improved a great deal more with a little bit more care and attention. But it does give us a lot of the tools we need to be able to succeed better. And yes, if we catch people and we are professional in how we have recorded the case files, how we've transported people, looked after people, we've got rid of all the loopholes, potential accusations about human rights or whatever, and we have worked with the judiciary and the magistrates, then we can get a solid case and we can get a solid sentence. You know, I'm sitting in a building in Murchison Falls that we finished last year, built by children from different families of poacher groups around the north of the park. They made the bricks. They actually, under a construction company, helped build this. This is the operations room. This is where we plan and monitor everything. To the right of me, outside of this building, is the armory. Beyond that is the police station, where we have the cells where the poachers will be held. So I'm right in the middle of it here, but we built all of this with the design to make sure that all of those mistakes that we just kept making, we weren't looking after the evidence well enough or labeling it well enough, or it could have been tampered with, whatever, or we weren't having good enough relations with the magistrates, we'll bring them here. They've come with the senior policeman and looked at the cells, which are the police cells. We've handed it over officially to them. And they said, these are the best in the country. And you've got a men's loop, a ladies' loop. So the ladies are taken, if it's a lady poacher, to the ladies' loop. There's no question of accusations of anything. All the things that could have been there, we're managing to get out of that. So the net result is that people are actually getting quite scared of being taken to court. There's also a specific wildlife court in Kampala, which is much less likely to be corrupted. And the great thing of that is, if these poachers are caught up here and they're senior guys or trafficking, we're actually taking them to the wildlife court well away from this area in Kampala, where there are people in the judiciary who are fully cognizant of the law and how it is applied. And if we mess up, okay, that's our fault. But we're now not looking at a largely corrupted system.
Yeah.
If someone
amazing
and says, nah, chuck it out of court, that judge will be chucking solid evidence, solid cases out of court. And that's their next on the line.
That's interesting, because I've thought, you know, when I spend more time over there, you know, I'm hoping to be there 6 months a year at least. I've really thought about diving into the whole, you know, arrest system, the judicial system, and making sure, speaking of that Zambezia Conservation Alliance, there was a very interesting woman named Ever, and she's an attorney, and she talked about coming around, making sure that people had, you know, things stuck when they were arrested, like you said, getting the evidence properly processed, doing it the right way so there's no loopholes, all that stuff. But I don't believe Zambia has a wildlife court. I'm going to have to investigate, because
I don't think they do. It was a brilliant idea by a gentleman here, Ugandan gentleman called Vincent, and he created it. It's entirely his thing, and it's brilliant.
When did it? How long ago?
6, 7 years ago, maybe 8.
Really?
And he's done a fabulous job with it. And he's not the only, obviously, keen lawyer to work in the wildlife conservation area, or indeed a lawyer who's been clever enough to say, well, actually, owning a firearm isn't necessarily only in the Wildlife Act, it's actually against other acts, so you use other acts as well. It's just having savvy lawyers. But yeah, that particular thing where it's in, and he's done really, really well.
That is a great takeaway for me, because that's something when I go back in June, I'm going to have a discussion with the senior chief Nasefu and the Department of National Parks, and talk about what, creating a wildlife, because you're right, because, in the African society, everybody's related to everybody, and it's hard to get people to squeal on, their cousin and stuff like that. They're too entwined. You need to take things out of an area to get a clear and fair, ruling on something like that. It's very difficult, and that's amazing. No wonder Uganda's, the Wildlife Authority and everything is working better. That is a great idea, and please pass along my compliments to Vincent, because that's just flat out genius. That's genius.
And he is, to be fair.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, really, that's an amazing thing. So, so where do you see your foundation? What do you hope to achieve in the next 10 years? What would you like to see? What do you think is doable? Like, where do you think?
That's a really challenging question. And the reason for it is that right at the moment, we're living week by week, because every week a new torpedo of a challenge comes in and blows our minds, and we go, how are we going to deal with this? What I would say is that we are dealing with it, and we are now paying for lots of the operational cost of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, whether it's the food for the rangers and the patrols, whether it's the fuel for the cars, the maintenance of the cars, the tires, keeping the patrol boats going, paying for veterinary drugs. That stuff was never part of our portfolio, but now is right in the core of it, as well as all the other stuff. I mean, ultimately, I would love to be in a position that we're not needed, and we could say, well done, we've done, close. Well done, Ugandan Wildlife Authority, you're doing a brilliant job, keep going.
Yeah.
Is that realistic? Probably not. But we've got a lot of challenges to set up the same foundations of park management in Queen Elizabeth National Park, same foundations of park management across into Kadepo as well. Kadepo being in the northeast. Now, once those are there, you can pretty much say the next generation's got a solid chance of doing well. If they're not there, you've got a very good chance within a decade of not having that park. And a decade ago in Murchison, that's where we were. But now we've got that stuff in place, we're able to hold our own. And if one place doesn't do well, you can bet your bottom dollar the rest will. So we've got to, sometimes it's boring what you have to do, but if you don't do it, everything falls down. We've got to sustain it so it becomes the modus operandi of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, if you like. It is just, the culture is this. It is positive, it's proactive, it's supportive. All the different things that, we've been talking about today are the things that, you can see the individuals and more of them coming up with, but it's got to become a culture. And that's the key. And whatever helps that happen, whether it's buying better boots or rucksacks or whatever it is, that's probably the best place to go to with it. But there's a million and one challenges, honestly. I mean, I don't sometimes know what is coming next. In Queen Elizabeth National Park, we have a huge invasive species of a tree, very thorny tree, called Dichrostasis, and it's taken over hundreds of square kilometers. And we found a way of killing it effectively and cleanly and without impacting anything else. But hundreds of square kilometers is a bit of a big challenge.
Yeah.
But it has to be done. It has to be. So, are we going to be Dichrostasis killers for 10 years? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, again, there's something every day that comes up, but I love that the positive reinforcement that people are reacting to, wanting to be part of something big and good. And there's a great feeling, and I try to impart that with our team, is you are part of a family. You are part of a really unique team that can really change the world. And that's a rare opportunity, and that's a rare gift. And look at it that way. You know what I mean? That you directly can change something. And we've developed a great relationship with Senior Chief Nasefu. I love him, and I know he's going to be an even better leader. You know what I mean? Let us help you lead this area, and you be the touchstone of good with conservation and understanding stuff. And his impact can grow. You work with people that you love and you care about, and you want to see them thrive and succeed. And there is really nothing, I can't think of another area of work or philanthropy that is more amazing than working with groups in Africa who are really changing the world. Just like you are, Michael, and you and Uganda Conservation Foundation, again, my special guest on Coexist, you saw an issue, and so many people say, gosh, that's a shame. I wish I could do something. And then they're gone. There are very few people who stop and say, I see something wrong. I'm going to do something about it. True, your friends kind of pushed you to it, but they knew you were the right man for the right job to do it. If somebody wanted to help you guys, how would they be able to support you? Where would they go?
Well, we do have a website. It's horribly out of date, as you might imagine, as just about all websites are, I think.
Yeah.
So yes, you can go there, and that is ugandacf.org.
That's for Uganda Conservation Foundation. So that's ugandacf.org. Okay.
Yeah. But if in America you want to support a 501c, which of course you would, we have an alliance with the amazing group that I mentioned earlier called the International Elephant Foundation.
Okay.
And I would endorse anyone wishing to support them for any of their projects, but also, of course, to ours. And they are 501c registered, and they are absolutely incredible. So I would encourage people just to tag on it saying, maybe you've seen the show or you'd like to support Uganda, or whichever project you wish. They're all important. And they'll go through the International Elephant Foundation in America.
Oh, and speaking of, before we wind things up here, speaking of TV, you had the Wildlife Doc TV series in 2016. How did that all come about? And
well, that's all to do with your Busch Garden SeaWorld gang, which includes Todd. Mm-hmm. And the wonderful Rob Yordi, who's the director of their conservation programs as well. And they came out to film us in the field years ago. I'm amazed you even found out about that. And they got us when we were collaring lions in Kadepo. We were saving giraffes from snares and a ration they had on their necks in Murchison Falls, and doing various things. And yes, they did 3 or 4 episodes on us. So yes, I'm a movie star.
You are. I hang only with the stars. That's why I reached out. Hanging with the stars. That's so awesome, Michael. Well, I have to tell you, I just you get feelings about people even before you actually meet them. You and I were emailing back and forth. I was hoping that we could connect because you're saying, oh, I'm going to be in the bush. I don't know how internet's going to be. And I'm like, you know what? We'll take a shot because it's so worth it. Again, having a foundation myself, I have such a greater appreciation for what people are doing in the world, how incredibly hard it is. I'm sure you can relate to not being able to sleep a full night because at about 2 a.m. you think, oh my God, I got payroll coming up. 3 o'clock is like, oh my God, I haven't had a full night's sleep in I don't know how long. But hey,
we're back out on patrol at 7 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. I guess I can sleep when I'm dead is basically what's going to happen because I haven't slept much since I started this thing. But I have such an appreciation and an affinity for people who answered a higher call, who decided to do something about it. Again, my special guest, Michael Keigwin, who is a member of the British Empire. He's the founder of Uganda Conservation Foundation that works alongside the Uganda Wildlife Authority, or that support blanket to make sure that things that need to get done. You help wherever you're needed. You come up with these great strategies and visionary things like, hey, let's do this, or let's rethink this. All that stuff is so impactful. And again, extinction is real. It is happening on the continent in frightening numbers right now. When you think of when I lived in the 60s in Africa, there were 10 million elephants and they number less than 300,000. We have 25,000 rhinos. None of these numbers are acceptable, and we're not going to sit around and just watch them disappear. We're going to do something about it, and you can help support great organizations like the Uganda Conservation Foundation. Again, ugandacf.org, or you can support Michael and his team through International Elephant Foundation. And Michael, is there anything else we can help you with or spread the word on, other than you being a big movie star? And an MBE?
Just to wish everyone well and keep safe. It's a pretty torrid world out there right now. And there's something my father told me, sadly, a few days before he died. And that is, if you can make anyone around you smile in an hour, just one person smile around you, you've not wasted that hour. And I reckon if everyone did that a little bit more in this world, it'd be a damn sight better. So just wave at someone.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Lift somebody up. That's great. And I hope you come to your work one day in Uganda. I invite you to come to Zambia, stay at Zakomo Safari with us, come see Nsefu, see what we're doing. It'd be an honor. It'd be an honor to see your work up there. And congratulations on everything. And again, such an honor and a privilege to speak with you for an hour, especially after you just saved an elephant in a snaring case and came straight to us to talk about it. So again, Michael, a pleasure. Please reach out anytime you need anything, if I can help you. If you need a follow-up on any big projects that you're doing that you really need some global support on, I'll do the best I can to get the word out there, because I got your back. So like you have the Uganda Wildlife Authority's back, I've got your back here on Coexist. So such a pleasure. Love to the family, and give my very best to your team, okay?
Will do. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you. Again, another edition of the Coexist podcast. You can check it out on iqpodcast.com. Would love to hear from you. You can always email me at coe@nsefu, nsefu.org. If you've got any ideas for a show, if you want to learn more about Michael, I can pass along information about the UCF to you and all this stuff. That's what we're here for, supporting others and spreading the word of conservation, because it is conversation for conservation. So have a great day. Thanks again, Michael. Be safe there.
Bye all.
Okay, bye.